Call it late stage capitalism, call it unbridled greed, call it just stupidity. But we're going to go over today how a large corporation is making choices that will benefit them in the short run, almost certainly hurt them in the long run. And we're going to break it all down: the economics, the science, the details, the drama. So stay tuned. All right. The primer. We need to talk about Wizards of the Coast. They're also called WOTC, which, for those of you who don't know, it's like WOTC, Wizards of the Coast, WOTC. Nobody explained that to me. I had to figure that out all on my own. Poor me. So Wizards of the Coast, they own a number of brands, but the one we're talking about today is Magic the Gathering. They own Magic the Gathering, and it is a monopoly, and it is a strong monopoly. And let's talk about monopolies real quick, because it's a fun word that gets thrown around, but it has some kind of scientific meanings associated with it that sometimes we brush over. Monopolies have price control, but they don't get to choose everything. They can't control everything, right? So in general, what a supplier can choose is how much they supply, and then they can also choose the asking price. But they don't get to set both of those things. And this is what I mean. If a monopoly could just choose how much they supply and choose the price, they would make infinite and sell it for infinite money, right? That's not how it works. They essentially get to choose one or the other. They can either choose the amount they want to create, and then the market will choose what price it will buy all of those for, or the monopoly can choose a price, and then the market will decide at that price how much the market wants. And practically speaking, like what we see happen and play out in real life is that Wizards of the Coast chooses a price, right? They have a price that they sell their secret lairs for. They have a price that they sell things on Amazon for. They have a price that they sell things to distribution for. Then distribution has to make choices about what to sell to game stores for. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The point is, Wizards of the Coast has vast control. Another important point about monopolies is that they have what economists will refer to as like rent power, I'm mixing up a couple things. It's not about it being a monopoly. It's that they have control over intellectual property that people cannot replicate. And so it's kind of like monopoly, but it's a little different. And it's different in this sense that Wizards of the Coast owns Magic the Gathering, the card game. And they own the rights to the art in the game and the mechanics. And I'm not exactly sure how it works, because there's people on Etsy who sell proxies and they get away from it. They get away with it as long as the symbols on the cards are slightly different. So I'm not sure what's legally enforced versus what's legally legal. But Wizards of the Coast owns Magic the Gathering. And because of that, they can print cards and other people cannot print cards. Kind of. And what that means, practically speaking, is that people who own economic rents, who own something like an intellectual property that is valuable, like Magic the Gathering is, they will see the money. They will get the money. And what this means, what I'm saying is, like, the game store, anybody can open up a game store. Anybody can get a lease and, paint the walls and get up the bookshelves and call up distro and get cards and put them on shelves. That does not have an economic rent associated with it. There isn't something that is barring other people from doing it. However, Wizards of the Coast owns Magic the Gathering. Nobody else can make Magic the Gathering. They have an economic rent, and they have barriers. There's barriers to entry. There's a lack of competition. And because of that, what we'd expect through all the stories that we tell about the economics and how money moves around is that Wizards of the Coast is going to get the lion's share because they own the economic rent. Another example, right, is like actors, like famous actors. If Robert Downey Jr. starring in a movie means the movie is going to make an extra $1 billion, we would expect Robert Downey Jr.'s salary to be close to $1 billion. That's what an economist would expect. And obviously it doesn't work out exactly that way every time. But the idea here is that if you are the key ingredient, if you own the thing that makes it special, then you are going to end up getting the money that's associated with whatever makes that special. So with Wizards of the Coast, with Magic, Wizards owns Magic. If Magic is special, and if Magic makes game stores extra money or makes whatever extra money, we would expect in the long run, Wizards of the Coast to get the lion's share of that revenue. More on that later. Right. So Wizards of the Coast, they sell trading cards. They make money. They are a monopoly. They also have intellectual property that is valuable, that it's a specific moat that gives them an economic rent and the ability to squeeze a lot of juice out of this kind of market and economy. However, Wizards of the Coast don't actually sell cards, do they? Well, kind of. But let's get into, I've drawn a picture, people. Today I am an artist, and this is my pen, and I am writing. And here you have this nice diagram where there's the consumer on the left-hand side. And this consumer has money. And this consumer goes to the game store. And the game store, I'm going to do the arrow this way, because the game store provides the consumer with the games. In this case, Magic the Gathering. However, the game store did not make Magic the Gathering. They did not make the cards. They got it from a partner that we're going to call distro or distribution. And so distribution provides the game store with the cards. However, distribution did not make the cards either. Distribution is just a kind of a monolithic term for a company that distributes products. They are, by definition, a middle person, right? And they get their products from Wizards of the Coast, who actually make and print Magic. And so that is the flow. And that's how it works, with two exceptions. One exception are big box stores. And so I'll draw them in here. We're going to draw in our, this will be Walmart. Walmart and other big box stores have direct agreements with Wizards of the Coast, and they're able to get product directly. Here's another theme, something that we'll need to keep in mind. By the way, we're not talking about morality here. Let me look you in the eyes and let's talk about this. What I'm explaining to you about economics is not about what is right or wrong. This is not a discussion about morals or ethics or the way the world should be. This is a discussion about reality. This is what we observe in the universe and what plays out. And so when I talk about economic rents and how the money goes to whoever holds the special ingredient, or when I talk about this next reality, which is just that as scale goes up, the relationship becomes more valuable. Larger businesses are more profitable for Wizards of the Coast to work with than smaller businesses. These are just realities. There's not, it's not a, normative and positive, I think, are the terms. Anyways, my political science old self would be ashamed that I'm messing up the exact PhD bullcrap terminology, but do not confuse what I'm saying with this is how I think things should be. This is just how things are. And, we could change the rules to the game. We could create like laws or institutions or whatever that could change the rules, and then we would see a different outcome. But based on the current rules of this economic game, this is the reality. And the reality is Wizards of the Coast loves to work with direct partners like Walmart, who will also sell cards to the consumer, because Walmart is a huge company, and it is easier to have better profit margins selling directly to Walmart, who sells directly to the consumer. At each step, like each of these arrows represents money being lost, right? So there's some money when Wizards of the Coast sells to distro needs to get paid. They're not doing a free service. They get paid for this. And when distro sells to the game store needs to get paid. They need to make money from this. And then, of course, the game store sells to the consumer, and the consumer buys it at MSRP or whatever the price is. But when Wizards of the Coast can cut out distribution, sell it directly to Walmart, who sells it directly to the customer, both Wizards of the Coast and Walmart can make more money. And so an unfortunate reality is just that the bigger the company is, the partner is to work with, the easier it is to make money working with that partner. And that goes to the third type of partner the Wizards of the Coast has, which is our Lord and Savior Jeff Bezos with the Amazon. Amazon. sells direct to consumer, and they sell Magic cards. Wizards of the Coast, since I think it's like 2018 or 19 or something like that, has had a special relationship with Amazon and has taken advantage of that relationship to sell many, many Magic cards online direct to consumers. And so these are the different ways that Wizards of the Coast sells cards to consumers to make money. But Wizards of the Coast is not going direct unless, of course, going back to my thing, unless they do go direct through something like Secret Lair. But we're not going to talk about Secret Lair a lot, but I'll put SLD for Secret Lair drops. They do have partners here too, though, like Scale Fast. Scale Fast. I can't read that. That's fine. And so I'm not exactly sure how that works out. But anyways, there's more and more ways that Wizards of the Coast is creatively figuring out how to cut out middle people, how to not use distribution, how to get products directly to consumers, and to keep more of that money. So it's interesting. A couple notes on the relationship with Amazon. Amazon, to partner with Amazon, you have to sign a deal with the devil. Amazon, there's some legal ambiguity here, but Amazon makes it very difficult for sellers to sell a product on their website and also sell the product on a different website for less. Amazon wants, if you're selling on Amazon, it needs to be the cheapest price, at least tied or cheaper than you are selling it elsewhere. So that doesn't mean that Amazon can't sell a collector booster box of Lore and Eclipse for more than your local game store. That's okay. But if Wizards of the Coast on their website was selling Lore and Eclipse collector booster boxes, and they were also selling Lore and Eclipse collector booster boxes on Amazon, Amazon would not be okay with Wizards of the Coast having a lower price on their own website than the price they have on Amazon. What's interesting is there's also similar rules with companies like DoorDash. Like DoorDash doesn't want McDonald's charging less for their burgers if you buy at the counter than they charge for burgers if you buy on the app through DoorDash. The way that companies like McDonald's get around this is they have apps with points. And so they say, oh, if you want a burger from us, whether you get it on DoorDash or you get it from our counter, it's going to be $10. But if you have the app, you get a coupon for $2 off any $10 purchase. So it'll actually only be $8, where, of course, that coupon on the app doesn't work with DoorDash. Anyways, fun fact on the side. But so yeah, Amazon has some level of price control. It's an intense relationship, but that represents to Wizards of the Coast's excitement about that relationship, that they love having a partner that takes care of the distribution and the selling side of it. And of course, Amazon takes some kind of fee, but Wizards of the Coast is doing it because it makes money. It makes them money that they wouldn't be able to make if they were using their other traditional partners, like even the big box stores, but also distribution and local game stores. If they could make all the same good money going through distribution, then they just would have kept doing that. But they saw an opportunity to get more money, so they're cutting out distribution and selling directly to consumers through Amazon. So very interesting, right? We got this picture. Let me pull the picture up again, make sure we're not missing anything. We got Wizards of the Coast, Walmart, Amazon, distro. Talking about distro real quick, I mean, I'm obviously not a game store owner. I've listened to a lot of game store owners. And also that's kind of a caveat too, is that if I'm wrong about anything, please let me know. That there's a possibility. I'm pretty confident about everything I'm sharing here today, but you can just start off the comment by saying you are wrong, period, and then just keep going. And I will read that. But distribution, so Wizards of the Coast will not sell, or distribution will not sell products directly to people. They'll only sell to stores. And so in order to get product from distribution, you have to have a game store, which that's different than other games. Other games like Pokemon, there are YouTubers that just sell out of their basement and they have access to distribution. But Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast, the distribution partners, they don't do that for Magic. You have to have a brick and mortar game store. And these brick and mortar game stores, of course, when they get started out, they have a small allocation, which is just the fancy word for how much product they're able to order. And then over time, as they spend and grow, they can get higher and higher allocations. Distribution has this tricky job of essentially just collecting all the products that Wizards of the Coast are selling and shipping out and then shipping it to the game stores. Where things get interesting, though, and kind of dicey is that it's not clear the rules. Like, I'll write this up here. It is not clear, at least I've seen confusion from game store owners about the rules between how distro works and game stores work and what's allowed and what isn't. So, for example, there are stores that are able to get a product, or at least were able to get a product, like Modern Horizons 3 Play Booster boxes for $230 a box. Okay, great. That's the price from distribution to the game store. Well, then the question becomes, okay, if game stores are getting Modern Horizons 3 Play Booster boxes for $230, how are they $230 on TCG Player? And one answer for that is game stores, in order to up their allocation and to gain a better relationship with distribution, will sometimes buy products and lose money on them. And so they'll buy for $230 from distribution and then sell on TCG Player for $230, and they lose on shipping and fees. And that is a thing that game stores do and has happened and will continue to happen. Another answer is that some game stores get better deals with their distribution partners than others. And so you see larger game stores are sometimes able to pre-sell or sell products for cheaper than smaller game stores. And part of the reason for that is that their relationship with distribution is stronger, and they were able to get Modern Horizons 3 Play Booster boxes. Instead of getting them for $230, they were able to get them for $210 each. And so they're able to sell for $220 on their local website and undercut the market, but still make money. And, maybe not after fees and shipping, I guess, but even on their own website, after shipping and fees, the $220 box that you spent $210 on, not sure how you're making money. But anyways, I digress. But then the question becomes, how was Flipside Gaming selling Play Booster boxes of Modern Horizons 3 if you bought a case at once for $210 each? After shipping and fees, if Flipside Gaming has the standard fees from eBay, after shipping and fees, they would have to be getting each Modern Horizons 3 Play Booster for like $180 or less from distribution, which is quite a bit less than the $230 that some game stores were getting them for. And the answer to that is that their larger stores on eBay can sometimes negotiate smaller fees. Same thing on TCG Player. And it's also possible that there's the wiggle room with distribution to give their largest account holders really screaming deals. So there's a lot of questions. Just, if you didn't hear any of that, there's a lot of question marks around this distro to store relationship because it's just not clear. The rules aren't clear. The game isn't clear. And that's the picture you get when you listen to Kevin and Louie and, RNG Games and, just every game store owner out there who has a YouTube channel, Final Trade, Game Vitamins, just, the rules are not clear, which is okay, I guess, but it just is what it is. Right. Okay, so let's talk about risks to the business model, because that's the point of this video. That's the thesis. We're 18 minutes in. What's going on? All right. So if the strategic partners fail, Wizards of the Coast can get hurt. That is the strategic risk. And so if there's a situation where the relationship, the direct to consumers, like let's say that Wizards of the Coast decides to just secret layer everything and sell it all directly to consumers, that would undercut distribution. Distribution would no longer be getting the same or any product from Wizards. They would go out of business, and the local game stores would not be able to get the same or any product from distribution, and they would go out of business. And at that point, unless Wizards of the Coast was able to replicate the same amount of volume selling direct to consumers as the volume that they'd lose from all the local game stores going out of business, Wizards of the Coast could lose money. And they don't want to lose money. They have a fiduciary duty, the people who run the company, to not lose money. And it's not just, and this is the other thing too, because we take a step back. This is all hypotheticals right now, but we're going to get into real examples, what Wizards of the Coast has done, what they are doing that might be losing them money. But what's interesting is just understanding that Wizards of the Coast is a for-profit company that has a publicly traded stock, Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, and they are obligated to make money now, but also in the future. Because that's one of the things is people will say like, oh, they're just, they just need money now. The stock price just has to be high now. And then they can exit. And then they're done and done. Yes, there are some bad incentives for sure in the stock market to pump and then just do stock buybacks and ride the wave. But particularly for a company like Hasbro that has a lot of pressure on it to perform, that only has one section of their company that's really knocking it out of the park, which is Wizards of the Coast. They might be thinking at just like, how can I pump these quarters numbers? But if there's any competence in that building, they're thinking long-term too. And so that being said, let's get into how they have certainly hurt their own business over the past couple of years by undermining some of these relationships and some of these ways that they have made money in the past. So the story starts really in 2022, 2023. There's lots of fantastic things that happened in 2022, 2023. And by fantastic, I mean absolutely terrible, awful things that Wizards of the Coast did to hurt their own profits. The number one, in my opinion, as just a regular consumer and follower of Magic, was the 30th edition of Magic the Gathering that came out late 2022. When they sold, for those of you who don't know, when they sold 4 booster packs for $1,000 of proxy cards that were not legal in any format, that were reprints of Alpha, that was stupid. That was crazy. And people did not like that, and really hurt their brand, really hurt their ability to sell products, that hurt their relationships with customers. And it didn't do very well anyway as a product that they sold on their Secret Lair website, and it did not sell out. So that was a cell phone. That was a big deal. But more pertinent to this video and what we're talking about is how they hurt their relationships with distribution and with local game stores, which was Amazon dumps. This was very common back in the Streets of New Capenna era, back in the Innistrad, Crimson Vow, Midnight Hunt era, were products, and it was a very clear story that kind of happened, which is that Wizards will go to distribution and say, how much do you need? Or I'm not sure exactly how that relationship goes, but distribution will go to the game stores and say, how much do you need of Innistrad Midnight Hunt? And game stores, at a time when the market was not strong, thanks to things like Magic 30th edition. Let me double check exactly when when did Magic 30 come out? Late 2022. And so let me pull up my handy dandy investor cheat sheet. So this late 2022 is the time of Streets of New Capenna, Double Masters, Dominaria United. Dominaria United was a thing. Yeah. So this is after Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow. But so anyways, Streets of New Capenna, the Magic 30th edition must have really kind of been the last straw in a way. Leading up to that, we had this situation where game stores were asked, hey, how much Innistrad Crimson Vow do you want? And game stores are like, I don't know, I guess we want some. So distribution goes back to Wizards and says, we don't want a lot of Innistrad Crimson Vow. People are not excited for it. It's not a great product. We don't want a ton of it. And I don't know if I'm making up a conversation. Maybe distribution's always like, give us it all. I don't know. But regardless, what happened was there's a glut of product, and Wizards of the Coast at the end of the day has two choices as a seller, or as kind of the monopoly holder, as the intellectual property holder, as the monopoly. They can either lower prices or lower quantity that they're selling. And what would be the consequences of each of these? Well, they already printed a bunch, so they're sitting in boxes and warehouses, whatever. If they lowered the quantity, that would essentially just mean burning it or putting it in dumpsters, destroying the product. And what would that mean? It would mean lost revenue, but it wouldn't mean, it would mean that the current market, whatever the current market conditions, wherever that supply-demand curve intersected to create a market price, would be stable, because they whatever supply was already on the market would stay on the market, and there wouldn't be any new supply. Their other option is to keep that supply on the market. But in order to do that, to inject a bunch of supply into the market, you have to lower prices. And maybe, is this a good opportunity for me to draw something? That could be fun. Let me see if I can pull out a nice little clean black sheet, and we can draw exactly what this looks like. The problem of this is that I don't actually know how to use paint very well, so maybe this will have to wait. But anyways, oh no, it doesn't have to wait. Here we go. Share screen. Okay. Thank you for my very prepared presentation. So for those of you who don't know, in economics, the way that we map things out is supply and demand, and it's on this like XY axis of price and quantity. So quantity will be this x-axis and price is the y-axis. And what happens here is we have an upward sloping supply curve and a downward sloping demand curve. The reason we have that is because as price goes up for something, as the quantity demanded goes up for something, more people are willing to supply it. Think of this as Kaladesh booster boxes after they banned the word Kaladesh. Suddenly, there was way more added to TCG Player. Where did those come from? Well, people wanted more and the price went up, so the supply magically went up. It's not that more boxes were printed. If more boxes were printed, that would have been a shift of this supply curve to the side. But that's not what happened. What happened was we went from a supply here. I mean, what happened actually was the demand shifted. So that we're talking about Kaladesh. When the word Kaladesh got banned from Magic, demand shifted. So this is demand 2. And as demand shifted, what we saw was the quantity supplied. We have a new spot on our supply curve, new quantity supplied, a new price. The price went up, and a new quantity sold went up, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for my intro to econ. So what are we talking about? We're talking about what happens when Wizards of the Coast dumps a ton of new supply of a product like Innistrad Midnight Hunt onto the market. Well, the supply curve gets shifted to the right. We get a supply shock where supply goes up. And now you can see, so this is supply 2, you can see what happens to the quantity that gets sold, and you can see what happens to the price. Wizards of the Coast is monopoly. Excuse me. Wizards of the Coast is monopoly, but they can't control how the market reacts. So they can control that they're going to print more and make more. But what happens is we're going to go from this spot right here down to this spot right here, which is that more will be sold and the price will go down. Now, that's a problem if you have a bunch of game stores that rely on you for, business, and those game stores are holding the products that they've bought at a price from distribution. Let's say that they bought them from distribution for $180 each. I don't know if that's true, but if they bought them from distribution at $180 each, and then on Amazon, they begin to be sold for $140 each, it's going to cause problems. You get game stores who talk about how people would come into their store and say, hey, I can buy this box on Amazon for $140. Can you match that? And the game store says, no, I can't match that. I would go out of business. A very stressful, hard time to be a game store owner. I'm not a primary source. I am a secondary or tertiary source because I am just quoting what I've learned and heard from other people. But I'm sure people in the comments watching that do own stores that were around in 2022, late 2021, 2023 would say, yes, this was a hard time. So what about today? What's going on today? So I've seen some YouTubers talk about products that have come out recently, products like the Codex bundles or some collector products that are selling on Amazon, that are selling at Walmart and at Target, and that the supply to local game stores is cut, diminished, or zero. So what's going on? Well, we're continuing to seeing the undercut of the local game stores. Will this destroy Magic? I think that's the key question. That's kind of the premise of this video, is like, is Magic going to hurt itself in a way that it's going to collapse? Unfortunately, what would help us know that, I should say first, what would help us know that is to know how much of Wizards of the Coast revenue comes from their relationship with distribution. We don't know that. They don't make that public. They don't share that. If you have thoughts, if you think you know that, I would love to know that. But I don't know that. And so this is the question, is that, I mean, game stores are gritty. Game stores have passion and are willing to put in the effort and the hours to survive, even if there isn't the real support from distribution. And this is kind of the problem, right? Because I know that you want me to say like Wizards of the Coast is going to completely destroy themselves by selling directly on Amazon and directly to consumers through Walmart and Target and just other non-distribution, non-game store routes. Wizards of the Coast is not supporting local game store enough. From a morality perspective, that's true. But from an economics perspective of just the reality of their business, we don't know. And it's very possible the Wizards of the Coast can get away with tomfoolery like this Amazon stuff, like this undercutting game stores, like this cutting off supply of Codex bundles to game stores and instead selling them at Targets. It is possible that Wizards can get away with a lot more of this, and that game stores would still function and still do distribution and allocation. Why do I say this? Because game stores already do this. A lot of the game stores that survived 2022 and 2023, they're not surviving, and even the ones that survive today, even in a bull market, they're not surviving because they're getting infinite collector booster boxes and they're able to sell them at market prices and just rake in the cash. They survive because they have singles markets, because they buy collections from people for, 50, 55, 60, 65%, and then sell the singles back to a local market. And on TCG Player. Like, stores are gritty. They have found ways that, despite Wizards of the Coast not being very supportive, to survive. And that kind of behavior, I know Wizards notices that, and that kind of behavior makes me think that game stores could survive even more kind of punishment and an even worse relationship with distribution and still be fine. Not good. This is not good things. I want the game stores to be supported. And I do believe that there is, and I mean, the reality is there is some limit, right? At some point, if Wizards crosses a line, game stores will have to shut down. And if game stores are shutting down, they're not going to be able to buy product from distribution. And if distribution isn't able to sell that product, they're not going to be able to take it from Wizards of the Coast. And it will hurt Wizards of the Coast bottom line. But we just don't know where that line is. So it's tricky. Once again, I want to reiterate that everything I've talked about, it's not a moral, it's not a judgment. This isn't like me saying this is how things should be. This is just a reality and observation of the economics of how things are. So it's been a long video. If you haven't subscribed, you really ought to. I meant to advertise this at the beginning, but I'm getting close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to do a 1,000 subscriber celebration video. If you comment on that video and you are subscribed, you'll be entered in to win that box of Strixhaven play, as well as another card that's going to be worth a decent chunk of money, as well as there'll be a third prize, but that third prize is going to be pretty mediocre. I think it's going to be a single booster pack of Spider-Man, but still, winning stuff for free is fun. So 3 prizes, 3 winners. Subscribe and keep an eye out. That video is probably going to come out Monday night. And then maybe I'll give it like a few days, like 5 days or something like that before I pull the winners. So we'll see. But anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe. Let me know what you think. We'll see you later.